former Special Forces soldier, haunted by a past failure, finds a chance at redemption when he's the only one left to stop a terrorist cell. Welcome to the ultimate thriller. The flickering fluorescent light of the dusty gym barely illuminated Elias Thorne's calloused hands as they gripped the worn punching bag. Each thud was a release, a desperate attempt to silence the ghosts that screamed in his mind. Sweat plastered his dark hair to his forehead, his jaw clenched, revealing the sharp lines of a man who had seen too much. It had been 3 years since Kandahar, since the mission went sideways, since he lost his team, since he lost himself. Now he was a shadow, working odd jobs, avoiding eye contact, and living in the frayed edges of society. A notification buzzed on his ancient phone, a text from an unknown number. "We need you, Elias. It's about more than just a job." He stared at it, a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. Curiosity, perhaps even a hint of dread, crossing his weary features. He dismissed it. He was done with needs. Later that evening, as rain lashed against his apartment window, a sharp knock echoed. Elias tensed, his hand instinctively reaching for the well-hidden Beretta. He opened the door to find a woman, her trench coat gleaming with rainwater, her face a striking blend of authority and concern. This was Commander Ava Sharma, her eyes sharp and intelligent, assessing him with an unsettling intensity.
"Elias Thorne?" she asked, her voice calm but firm, a slight Indian accent softening the edges. "Who's asking?" he replied, his voice a low growl, his gaze unwavering. "My name is Commander Ava Sharma. I work for a specialized agency. We have a problem, a big one." Elias merely grunted, leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed. "I'm retired. You've got the wrong guy." Ava stepped closer, her expression shifting to one of earnest plea. A group calling themselves heirs has emerged. They're highly organized, sophisticated, and they've just hit targets in 3 European capitals simultaneously. They're planning something bigger, something here. We're out of options, Elias. We lost vital intel, and our operatives are stretched thin. You're the best Black Ops specialist we had. His eyes narrowed. Had? Past tense, Commander. He remembered the smell of dust and blood, the frantic radio chatter, the screams. I failed, remember? I watched my team die. His voice was raw, laced with self-loathing. Ava's gaze softened momentarily. Kandahar wasn't your fault, Elias. It was a setup, a betrayal from within. We know that now. Elias scoffed, turning his head away. Doesn't change anything. It changes everything, Ava insisted, her voice firm once more. This isn't about vengeance, Elias. It's about stopping a global catastrophe. We need your unique skill set. We need the man who could disappear and reappear like smoke, the man who could dismantle a hostile force with nothing but a knife and a whisper. Please, Elias, this is our last stand. He looked at her then, truly looked. He saw not just desperation, but a flicker of unwavering belief in his capabilities, a belief he hadn't seen in anyone, including himself, for years. A heavy silence hung between them, broken only by the rhythmic drumming of the rain. He closed his eyes, a distant memory of his team leader's face flashing behind his eyelids. He could almost hear their laughter, then the echoing silence. When he opened them, a different light was in their depths, a spark of purpose, however reluctantly ignited. "What's the play?" he finally asked, his voice rough. Ava allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible sigh of relief. A silent agreement had been made. Elias Thorne was back, whether he wanted to be or not.
Elias found himself in a sterile underground facility, a stark contrast to the gritty world he now inhabited. Ava introduced him to her small, elite team, Dr. Lena Hansen, a brilliant but socially awkward cyber analyst whose fingers danced across keyboards with dizzying speed, and Ben Carter, a young, eager field operative, fresh out of advanced training, his enthusiasm barely contained. "Aris," Lena began, her glasses perched on her nose, her eyes glued to a holographic display projecting complex network schematics. "They're a ghost. No traceable origins, no financial footprints, no public manifestos. Their operatives are phantoms, appearing and disappearing with uncanny precision." She looked up, her expression grim. "The attacks in Europe were a demonstration. They're testing our response, gauging our weaknesses." Ben leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "What's the endgame then?" "We don't know," Ava admitted, her face etched with frustration. "But based on the scale and sophistication, it's something massive, something that could cripple international security." Elias, silent until now, walked around the holographic display, his gaze piercing through the data, looking for the human element. "Targets?" he asked, his voice low. "They hit financial centers, government infrastructure," Lena explained. "But each target had a secondary, less obvious objective: data siphoning. We think they're building a comprehensive intelligence profile." "Of what?" Elias pressed. "Of everything," Ava interjected, a cold dread in her voice. "Power grids, communication networks, defense systems, individual high-value targets. They're mapping the world's vulnerabilities." Elias felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. This wasn't about a single bomb or a localized attack. This was about systemic collapse. He pointed to a highlighted node on the display. "This comms hub in Berlin, it was a decoy, wasn't it? The real target was further down the network." Lena's eyes widened. "How did you know?" "Pattern recognition," Elias stated simply, a shadow of his former analytical prowess emerging. "They want to keep us busy chasing ghosts while they steal what they really need." Ava nodded, a flicker of admiration in her eyes. "He's right. Lena, cross-reference all compromised data streams from Berlin with a focus on encrypted communication protocols. Ben, prepare for potential fieldwork. We're going to need eyes and ears on the ground." Lena's fingers flew across the keyboard, a flurry of code washing over the display. Suddenly, a small, faint signal appeared, an anomaly buried deep within a complex encryption. "I've got something, a residual data packet. It's tiny, almost imperceptible, like a digital breadcrumb." Elias leaned in, his expression intense. "Where does it lead?" "A private server farm," Lena replied, her voice tinged with excitement. "Hidden deep within the data centers of a multinational tech corporation, it's designed to be invisible." "That's our ghost," Elias muttered, a grim determination setting in. "That's where we find out what they're really planning." Ben's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "So, we hit it?" "Not yet," Ava cautioned, holding up a hand. "We gather intelligence. We observe. Elias, you're the ghost. You get in, you get out, and you bring us everything you can find without making a ripple. This mission requires precision, not brute force." Elias simply nodded, a familiar calm descending upon him. For the first time in 3 years, he felt a faint stirring of his old self. The operative who could vanish into the shadows. The man who thrived in the silent hunt. The ghosts of Kandahar still lingered, but now there was a new purpose, a new fire to fuel his redemption. Elias, now equipped with cutting-edge surveillance gear and a silenced pistol, moved through the labyrinthine corridors of the corporate data center with the predatory grace of a phantom. The server farm, a behemoth of gleaming metal and humming machinery, was located deep beneath the main building. His dark tactical suit blended with the shadows, his movements fluid and noiseless. He bypassed biometric scanners, disabled security cameras with surgical precision, and ghosted past unsuspecting guards, his face a mask of practiced indifference. Inside the heavily fortified server room, the air hummed with raw power. Rows upon rows of servers blinked with an eerie rhythmic light. Lena, communicating through a secure earpiece, guided him. There, Sector 7, Rack 12, Module B. That's where the rogue server is located. It's disguised as a standard archival unit. Elias moved with purpose, his eyes scanning, his senses acutely aware of every subtle shift in the environment. He located the target, a nondescript black box, indistinguishable from hundreds of others. He attached a small, specialized data siphon, its indicator light glowing a faint blue. "Data transfer initiated," Lena whispered, her voice a mix of tension and excitement. "It's pulling in everything. We're talking petabytes of information." As the data streamed, a new voice crackled over Elias's comms. Ben, his voice strained. "Elias, we've got movement, unscheduled patrol, 2 heavily armed individuals, not standard security. They're heading your way." Elias's jaw tightened. Understood. He scanned the room, identifying potential cover. The transfer needed to complete. He couldn't risk detection now. The footsteps grew closer, heavy and deliberate. Elias pressed himself against a server rack, becoming one with the shadows, his breathing shallow. 2 men, clad in dark, non-standard tactical gear, entered the room. They carried assault rifles, their eyes sharp, their movements professional. One, a burly man with a scarred face, pointed towards the rogue server. "Check that unit," the scarred man grunted, his voice guttural. "We had a sensor spike earlier, probably a rat." Elias felt a cold knot in his stomach. They knew, or suspected. His hand went to the grip of his silenced pistol. He needed to be absolutely silent. The second operative approached the server rack, his hand reaching for the unit where Elias's siphon was still silently working. The data transfer indicator glowed steadily, almost done. Elias moved. In a blur of controlled motion, he lunged, his hand covering the operative's mouth, his other hand pressing the silenced pistol to the man's temple. A muffled thud, and the man slumped, unconscious, not dead. Elias preferred not to kill unless absolutely necessary. The scarred man turned, alerted by the sudden silence. His eyes widened as he saw his partner on the floor. Before he could react, Elias was on him, a whirlwind of fists and elbows. The scarred man was strong, but Elias was faster, more experienced in close-quarters combat. A swift jab to the throat, a knee to the gut, and a brutal takedown left the second operative gasping for air, incapacitated. "Status, Elias," Ava's urgent voice broke through the comms. Elias straightened, his chest heaving slightly. "Package secured. 2 tangos neutralized, not dead. We've got their intel." "Excellent," Ava breathed, relief evident in her voice. "Extract immediately. We'll send a cleanup crew for the tangos." As Elias made his way out, melting back into the shadows, he felt a familiar rush, the adrenaline high of a successful mission. It was a dangerous game, but for the first time in years, he felt alive, truly alive, in the heart of the storm. Back in the secure facility, Lena and Ava pored over the siphoned data, a torrent of information overwhelming their systems. Ben stood by, observing with wide-eyed fascination. Elias, having shed his tactical gear, watched impassively, a silent sentinel. "It's staggering," Lena finally said, her voice barely a whisper, her face pale. "They have access to schematics for every major city's infrastructure, power grids, water treatment, transportation hubs, emergency services. And not just access," Ava added, her voice tight with suppressed fear. "They have control protocols, back doors into everything." "But why?" Ben asked, his youthful optimism fading. "What's the point of controlling all this?" Ava brought up a new holographic projection, a global map. Red dots began to appear, concentrated around major metropolitan areas. These are critical points, choke points. If they hit these simultaneously, it would cause widespread chaos, collapse essential services, and create a vacuum for them to exploit. Elias pointed to a particularly dense cluster of red dots in North America. This isn't just chaos. This is targeting economic and political centers. They're going for systemic breakdown. Exactly, Ava confirmed, her gaze hardening. But there's more. We found encrypted files detailing something called Project Chimera. Lena clicked a few keys, and a terrifying image appeared. A highly sophisticated, miniaturized electromagnetic pulse device. This, Lena explained, her voice trembling slightly, is designed to be virtually undetectable. It can be deployed in a standard delivery drone, disguised as a commercial package. A single pulse could take out an entire city's electronics within a 5-mile radius without any physical blast. Ben gasped, his face paling. So they could knock out an entire city, silently, remotely, and no one would know what hit them until it was too late. Worse, Elias interjected, his voice grim. If they deploy these strategically, it's not just a blackout, it's a cascade failure. No communication, no emergency services, no financial transactions. Society grinds to a halt, mass panic. Ava's expression was grim. They're planning to deploy these EMP devices at the red dot locations. A simultaneous, coordinated attack. Lena's fingers flew again, correlating the data. We've got a timetable. The attack is scheduled for 72 hours from now. A stunned silence fell over the room. 72 hours to prevent a global catastrophe? Elias felt a cold dread, but also a fierce determination. Do we have any leads on their base of operations? Who's behind this? Ava shook her head. Still a ghost. But we did get something else from your intel. A series of encrypted communications referencing a Lord Heiress and a gathering, a meeting point. She zoomed in on a location on the map, an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of the city. Tomorrow night, we believe it's where they'll finalize the deployment strategy. Elias looked at the location, his jaw clenched. This was it, the direct confrontation, the chance to face the architects of chaos. He looked at Ava, his eyes conveying a silent understanding. We hit them. We hit them hard. Ava nodded, her expression resolute. Yes, but this is a surgical strike, Elias. We take down their leadership, we seize their devices, and we prevent this attack. No collateral. This is our last chance. The weight of the world seemed to settle on their shoulders, but in Elias's eyes, a flicker of purpose, almost a dark hope, burned brighter than ever. He wasn't just fighting for redemption anymore. He was fighting for everyone. The abandoned industrial complex was a decaying concrete shell, swallowed by the creeping urban sprawl. Elias, Ben, and a small, hand-picked tactical team moved under the cloak of a moonless night, their movements precise and coordinated. Ava was monitoring their progress from the command center, Lena feeding them real-time intel. Thermal scans show approximately 20 hostiles inside, heavily armed. Lena whispered through the comms. 2 distinct clusters, a command center in the main warehouse and an armory in the north wing. Elias took point, his silenced assault rifle held ready. He had studied the blueprints, memorized every entry point, every blind spot. He felt a familiar calm, the razor-sharp focus that had made him legendary. But beneath it, a desperate urgency gnawed at him. They breached the perimeter silently, dispatching 2 perimeter guards with practiced ease, rendering them unconscious. The air inside was thick with dust and the metallic scent of decay. "Okay, Ben," Elias whispered into his comms. "You and your team handle the armory. Secure the EMP devices. I'm going for the command center." Ben, despite the tension, managed a confident nod. "Roger that, Elias. We'll be quick." As Ben's team peeled off, Elias moved towards the main warehouse. He could hear muffled voices, the clinking of glasses. They were celebrating,
finalizing their plans, blissfully unaware of the silent predator stalking them. He found a vantage point high above, looking down through a grimy skylight. Inside, a chilling tableau awaited him. 10 individuals, their faces a mix of cold intelligence and fanaticism, were gathered around a large table, projecting holographic maps of the world, adorned with the menacing red dots. At the head of the table sat a man, his back to Elias, his voice resonating with quiet authority. This had to be Lord Eris. "The world will tremble," Eris declared, his voice a calm, chilling baritone. "From the ashes of their collapsing society, a new order will rise, our order." Elias felt a surge of cold fury. He identified the EMP devices, already packaged in unassuming drone delivery boxes, lined up along one wall. They were ready. "Elias, you need to move," Ava urged, her voice low and tense. "They're finalizing the launch sequence. Ben's team is engaged in the armory now. It's getting hot." As if on cue, a volley of suppressed gunfire echoed from the north wing. The men in the command center stirred, expressions of annoyance crossing their faces. "Looks like we have unwanted guests," Eris said, his voice still unnervingly calm, a slight smile playing on his lips. "Deploy perimeter defenses. No one gets in, and no one gets out." Elias knew he had to act now. This wasn't just a mission anymore, it was personal. He was the last man standing, and the fate of millions rested on his shoulders. With a silent prayer for his fallen team, he prepared to descend into the hornet's nest. Redemption wouldn't come easy, but it would come with fire. Elias dropped into the command center with the force of a coiled spring, his boots landing silently on the concrete floor. The sudden appearance of a lone dark figure shocked the Eris operatives. Before they could fully react, Elias unleashed a torrent of controlled fire, his silenced rifle spitting death. 2 operatives went down instantly, their celebratory drinks shattering on the floor. Chaos erupted, chairs toppled, shouts filled the air, and Eris's remaining men scrambled for their weapons. Eris himself, however, remained unnervingly composed, a chilling smile still on his face. He drew a small, ornate pistol from his inner jacket. "An unexpected guest," Eris said, his voice echoing over the gunfire. "The legendary Elias Thorne. I've heard stories." Elias ignored him, his focus on neutralizing the immediate threats. He moved through the room like a wraith, a blur of motion and violence. Suppressed shots found their marks, bodies crumpled, and the air filled with the scent of gunpowder and fear. "Ben, status!" Elias barked into his comms, dodging a wild spray of bullets. "We've secured the armory." Ben's voice was strained but triumphant. "MP devices are disarmed and the room is clear. We're on our way to back you up, Elias." "Don't bother," Elias replied, a grim determination in his voice. "I've got this." He moved towards Eris, who was now calmly firing, his shots surprisingly accurate. As Elias closed the distance, he felt a sudden sharp pain in his left shoulder. Eris's bullet had grazed him. He gritted his teeth, the pain igniting a fresh wave of fury. He returned fire, forcing Eris to take cover behind a large server rack. "You think you can stop us, Thorne?" Eris's voice boomed, filled with manic confidence. "This plan is bigger than you, bigger than anyone. The world is rotten, and we are merely pruning the dead branches." Elias finally managed to pin down the last of Eris's remaining henchmen, disarming him with a brutal kick. Now it was just him and Eris. Eris emerged from cover, his pistol aimed directly at Elias. But before he could fire, Elias hurled a flashbang. A blinding light and deafening explosion filled the warehouse. When Elias's vision cleared, Eris was disoriented, his hands instinctively covering his eyes. Elias lunged, tackling him to the ground. They grappled, a desperate struggle for control. Eris was stronger than he looked, fueled by a zealous conviction. Elias, despite his wound, fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal.
During the struggle, Eris's mask, a simple, featureless white visor he'd worn throughout the confrontation, was torn off. Elias froze, his eyes widening in disbelief, a gasp escaping his lips. Staring back at him was a face he knew, a face that haunted his nightmares. General Marcus Vance, his former commanding officer. The man who had trained him, mentored him, and had allegedly perished in the Kandahar mission. The man Elias had believed was a hero. Vance's eyes, devoid of any warmth, held a chilling triumph. "Surprised, Thorne. Did you truly believe I died in that god-forsaken desert? Kandahar was a smokescreen, the first step in a much grander design." His voice was no longer calm, but filled with a venomous rage. "You were always a loose end, Elias, a loyal dog who asked too many questions." Elias felt a cold, crushing weight in his chest. Betrayal. It was always betrayal. Kandahar wasn't a failure, it was a setup. Vance had sacrificed his team, his own men, to further his monstrous plan. The redemption he sought now tasted like ash. Before Elias could fully process the shock, Vance produced a hidden blade, a glinting tactical knife, and plunged it towards Elias's side. Elias roared, a primal sound of pain and rage, and twisted, narrowly avoiding a fatal blow, the blade instead tearing through his tactical suit and cutting a deep gash in his ribs. Footsteps pounded towards them. Ben and his team burst into the warehouse, their weapons raised. "Elias!" Ben shouted, his face filled with concern at the sight of his wounded leader. Vance, seeing that his game was up, shoved Elias away, scrambling to his feet. He made a desperate dash towards a hidden exit, a small, barely visible door in the far wall. "He's getting away!" Ben yelled, raising his rifle. "No!" Elias gasped, clutching his wounded side, his face contorted in pain and fury. "He's mine!" He pulled himself up, his eyes locked onto the retreating figure of Vance, the ghost of Kandahar, the true architect of his torment. This wasn't just about stopping Eris anymore. It was about confronting his past, about finally getting answers, about vengeance and redemption, all rolled into one bloody package. Vance burst out of the industrial complex, adrenaline coursing through him, ignoring the shouts of Ben's team. He moved with a speed that belied his age, driven by a desperate need to escape. Elias, despite his bleeding wound, was right behind him, a relentless shadow. "Elias, stop! You're injured!" Ava's frantic voice crackled in his earpiece. "Ben's team can handle this. You need medical attention." "Negative, Commander," Elias growled, gritting his teeth against the searing pain in his ribs. "He's mine. This ends tonight." The chase led them through the treacherous landscape of the industrial district, across rusting metal catwalks, through abandoned warehouses, and down narrow, refuse-strewn alleys. Vance, surprisingly agile, used his knowledge of the terrain to his advantage, creating obstacles, forcing Elias to slow down. Elias could feel his strength waning, the blood loss beginning to take its toll. But the image of Vance's betraying face, the memory of his fallen team, fueled him. He pushed through the pain, each step a testament to his unwavering resolve. Suddenly, Vance scaled a fence, disappearing over the top. Elias, slowed by his injury, struggled to follow. As he reached the top, he saw Vance commandeering a parked old utility van. The engine sputtered to life, and the van roared away, kicking up dust and gravel. "He's got a vehicle," Elias reported, his voice tight with frustration. "Old utility van heading east on Commerce Street." "Understood," Ava replied, her voice filled with urgency. "We're tracking, sending patrol units to intercept, but they're still a few minutes out. Ben, do you have eyes on Elias?" "We're on his 6, Commander," Ben confirmed, his voice slightly out of breath. "Moving to secure a vehicle." Elias spotted an old beat-up motorcycle parked nearby, keys thankfully still in the ignition. He didn't hesitate. He swung his leg over, ignoring the jolt of pain, and kicked it to life. The bike roared to life, a stark contrast to the quiet professionalism of his earlier infiltration. This was raw, desperate pursuit. He sped after Vance, weaving through the darkened streets, the wind whipping past him. The pain in his side was a constant, throbbing reminder of the betrayal. He focused on Vance's taillights, a beacon of his past, speeding away into the night. Vance, looking in his rearview mirror, saw Elias relentlessly gaining on him. A flicker of genuine fear crossed his face, replacing his earlier composure. He swerved violently, trying to shake Elias off, but Elias was a master of pursuit, his instincts honed by years of relentless training. "He's desperate," Elias muttered to himself, leaning into a sharp turn, the motorcycle tires squealing in protest. "He knows I won't stop." As they entered a more residential area, Vance, in a final act of desperation, threw a duffel bag out of the van window. It bounced off the road, scattering objects, flashbangs, smoke grenades, designed to disorient and delay. Elias deftly swerved, avoiding the explosive devices, his focus unwavering. "He's reaching a dead end, Elias," Lena's voice suddenly cut through. "The street ahead is under construction, no through traffic." Elias pushed the motorcycle to its limits, closing the gap. He saw the barrier, the construction equipment, blocking Vance's escape. Vance was trapped. Elias skidded the motorcycle to a halt, drawing his pistol, his eyes burning with an intense, singular focus. Vance exited the van, his face contorted in a sneer of defiance. This was it, the confrontation he had unknowingly been seeking for 3 long years. Vance stood amidst the construction debris, his eyes wild and cornered, darting around. Elias slowly dismounted the motorcycle, his pistol held steady, aimed squarely at Vance. The pain in his side was a dull roar, but his resolve was iron. "It's over, Vance," Elias said, his voice low and gravelly, laced with venom. "Tell me why. Why Kandahar? Why this?" Vance let out a bitter laugh, devoid of humor. "Why? Because the world is weak, Elias. It's festering in its own complacency. I saw it in Afghanistan, in every conflict zone. The endless bureaucracy, the political maneuvering, the feckless leaders. They deserve to fall." He gestured wildly at the darkened city around them. "And I, Lord Eris, will be the architect of its rebirth." "Rebirth through chaos?" Elias scoffed, his finger tightening on the trigger. "You slaughtered innocent people, Vance. You betrayed your own men. My men." His voice cracked slightly on the last word, the pain of the past mixing with the fury of the present. Vance's expression twisted into a sneer. "Collateral damage, Thorne. They were expendable, just like your team. They served their purpose. You were the only variable, the one I couldn't control. Your loyalty was a weakness." Elias felt a cold rage consume him. "You set us up. You fed us false intel. You let them die." "It was necessary," Vance roared, his voice echoing in the desolate street. "Eris needed to rise, and I needed to disappear. Your team's sacrifice was a stepping stone, a glorious sacrifice for a glorious future." His eyes gleamed with a terrifying fanaticism. Just then, Ben and his team arrived, vehicles screeching to a halt, weapons trained on Vance. Ava's voice, strained and urgent, came through Elias's comms. "Elias, stand down. We have him contained. Do not engage further." But Elias ignored her. This wasn't about containment. It was about closure. "You killed them," he whispered, his voice dangerously soft. "And then you wore their faces in public, feigning grief. You're a monster, Vance." Vance chuckled, a chilling sound. And you, Elias? You're a broken soldier, clinging to a past that never was. You think you're righteous? You're just a pawn, a useful tool, just like everyone else. In a sudden, desperate move, Vance lunged, his hand going for the same hidden blade he had used earlier. Elias reacted instantly, his years of training kicking in. He parried the attack, the blade glinting ominously in the faint streetlights. The fight was brutal, fueled by raw emotion. Elias, weakened by his wound, fought with a primal ferocity. Vance, driven by fanaticism, was surprisingly strong. They traded blows, punches, and kicks, their movements a desperate dance of death. Elias knew he had to end this, not just for himself, but for his fallen team, for the world Vance sought to destroy. With a surge of adrenaline, Elias managed to disarm Vance, sending the blade skittering across the concrete. He then delivered a powerful blow, a precise strike that sent Vance reeling, collapsing against a pile of rubble. Vance lay there, defeated, his breathing ragged, his eyes filled with a simmering hatred. Ben and his team moved in, securing Vance, cuffing him. Elias stood over him, his pistol still aimed, his chest heaving, his face a mixture of exhaustion, pain, and a grim satisfaction. "It's over, Vance," Elias repeated, his voice devoid of emotion now. "Aris is dead." Vance merely spat at his feet, his eyes still defiant. "You haven't won anything, Thorne. The seeds have been sown. Others will rise. You merely delayed the inevitable." Elias simply stared at him, then lowered his weapon. He had faced his demon, the architect of his suffering, the betrayer. The physical pain was intense, but the weight on his soul, the unbearable burden of Kandahar, had finally begun to lift. The ghost of his past had been confronted, and for the first time in years, Elias Thorne felt a faint stirring of peace. Redemption had been a bloody, brutal path, but he had walked it. In the sterile confines of the secure facility, a palpable sense of relief permeated the air. Vance, now stripped of his Lord Eris persona, was being interrogated in a separate, soundproofed room. Elias, patched up by a medical team, sat with Ava, Lena, and Ben, the tension slowly draining from him. "We apprehended Vance and secured all the EMP devices," Ava announced, her voice filled with weariness, but also profound gratitude. "Thanks to you, Elias, a global catastrophe was averted. The world doesn't even know how close it came." Lena, still surrounded by flickering screens, provided updates. "We're systematically dismantling Eris's network. With Vance's capture, the organization is effectively decapitated. We've identified key lieutenants and are coordinating international raids." Ben, his youthful face beaming, looked at Elias with admiration. "You were incredible out there, Elias, like something out of a legend." Elias merely grunted, a faint smile touching his lips. He was still processing the full scope of Vance's betrayal, the layers of deceit that had unraveled. "What about the others Vance mentioned? Any truth to his claims of a larger movement?" Ava's expression grew serious. "We're investigating. It's possible Vance was just trying to sow doubt, or it could be a warning. We'll be on high alert, but for now, the immediate threat is neutralized." She looked at Elias, her eyes filled with a warmth he hadn't seen before. "Elias, I know what you went through with Vance. Kandahar was a scar, a wound that never truly healed. But you brought him to justice. You avenged your team. You found your redemption." Elias looked down at his hands, calloused and scarred. "It doesn't bring them back, but at least they didn't die for nothing." A flicker of genuine emotion crossed his face, a rare vulnerability. "No, they didn't," Ava affirmed softly. "Their sacrifice and your courage saved millions of lives." A comfortable silence settled, broken only by the hum of the computers. Elias felt a profound weariness, but also a sense of accomplishment, a weight lifted from his shoulders. The ghosts of Kandahar were still there, but now they were quiet, peaceful. "So, what happens now?" Ben asked, breaking the silence. "For you, Elias?" Elias looked out a window at the faint glimmer of dawn breaking over the city. He had spent so long living in the shadows, burdened by guilt. Now the path ahead was uncertain, but it was his to choose. "I don't know," he admitted, a rare honesty in his voice. "For a long time, I didn't think there was a now for me." He looked at Ava, then at Lena and Ben. "But maybe there's still a place for a man like me, a ghost who can fight for the light." Ava smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "There's always a place for a man who fights for what's right, Elias. Always." He nodded, a faint sense of hope stirring within him. The road to redemption had been long and bloody, but he had found it. And perhaps, just perhaps, he had found a new purpose along the way. The last man standing was no longer alone. Weeks turned into months. The world, unknowingly, continued its rhythm, oblivious to the catastrophe it had narrowly escaped. Elias Thorne, however, was not oblivious. He had chosen to stay, not as a field operative in the traditional sense, but as a strategic advisor, a ghost in the machine, offering his unparalleled expertise in black ops and counter-terrorism. His role was quiet, behind the scenes, yet vital. He helped train new recruits, imparting wisdom born of brutal experience. He meticulously analyzed emerging threats, his uncanny ability to see patterns where others saw chaos proving invaluable. He found a new kind of purpose, a way to honor his past while building a new future. One crisp autumn morning, Elias stood on a rooftop overlooking the city, the wind ruffling his dark hair. He was no longer the haunted, broken man who punched a bag in a dusty gym. The lines on his face were still there, etched by sorrow and battle, but they were now softened by a quiet strength. Ava joined him, a steaming cup of coffee in her hand, offering it to him. "Peaceful, isn't it?" she remarked, gazing at the cityscape. Elias took a sip, the warmth spreading through him. "Deceptive. There's always another storm brewing." "And we'll be ready," Ava said, her voice confident. She glanced at him, a knowing look in her eyes. "You've changed, Elias. You've healed." He looked at her, a rare, faint smile gracing his lips. "I wouldn't go that far, but I'm not running anymore, thanks to you." Ava merely nodded. "You saved us, Elias. You brought down Eris. You gave us hope." Lena and Ben approached, Ben holding a tablet. "Commander, Elias, we've got a new lead. Apparent resurgence of a cell operating under a new name, Phoenix. They're using similar methodologies to Eris, but with a focus on cyber warfare." Ben's expression was serious, but also held a flicker of excitement. Elias's eyes narrowed, his gaze sharpening. The familiar call of duty. He felt a surge of the old adrenaline, but it was different now, not tainted by guilt, but sharpened by purpose. "Show me," he said, handing the coffee back to Ava. He walked over to Ben, leaning in to examine the data on the tablet, his mind already piecing together the puzzle. Ava watched him, a quiet sense of satisfaction blooming in her chest. Elias Thorne, the last man standing, had found his redemption. He was no longer defined by his failures, but by his unwavering commitment to protect the innocent. He was still a ghost, but now a ghost who fought for the living, a silent guardian in a world perpetually on the brink. The fight was far from over, but with Elias Thorne on their side, humanity had a fighting chance. And for Elias, that was enough. The sun rose higher, casting a golden glow over the city, a new day dawning, and Elias Thorne, the once broken soldier, stood ready to face whatever shadows it might bring.